Welcome back to Ethos Trek. I'm Sera, and today we're talking about priorities. Specifically, what Congress prioritizes and what it doesn't. This week, congressional leaders released the conference version of the fiscal year 2026 National Defense Authorization Act. That's the NDAA. And it's about to pass for the 64th consecutive year. Let that sink in. 64 years. Through Vietnam, Watergate, the Cold War, 9/11, 2 Iraq wars, financial crises, impeachments, and everything else. Congress has managed to pass this bill every single year since 1961. This year's bill authorizes $900.6 billion in national security spending. That's about $8 billion more than President Trump even requested. Bipartisan cooperation at its finest. But here's what Congress couldn't manage to do. Extend health care subsidies that 22 million Americans depend on to afford their insurance. Those subsidies expire in 3 weeks, December 31st. And we just came out of the longest government shutdown in American history, 43 days, because Democrats tried to force action on health care. Spoiler alert, they lost. So, let's break down what's actually in this NDAA, what got left out, and what this tells us about who Congress is actually working for. What's in the fiscal year 2026 NDAA? Let me start with some genuine positives, because there are some. Service members are getting a 3.8% pay raise. Considering the inflation rate under Trump is 3.0%, that's a meaningful raise. Military families have been struggling with inflation just like everyone else, and this helps. The bill also includes quality of life improvements, better housing, child care support, and spousal employment assistance. These are real, material improvements for those who serve. The bill repeals the 2002 Iraq War Authorization for Use of Military Force, AUMF, and the 1991 Gulf War, AUMF. This is constitutionally significant. For over 2 decades, presidents have used the authorizations to justify military action without going back to Congress. Article 1, Section 8 gives Congress, not the president, the power to declare war. Repealing these outdated authorizations is a step toward restoring that constitutional balance. The bill also repeals sanctions on Syria. With the Assad regime finally gone after years of civil war, this opens the door for potential reconstruction and humanitarian aid to the Syrian people. Now, let's talk about where the money is actually going. There's significant funding for the Golden Dome missile defense system and the new F-47 fighter aircraft. There's money for submarines, warships, and autonomous weapon systems. The bill includes $1.5 billion for military construction in the Indo-Pacific to counter China, plus $1 billion for the Taiwan Security Cooperation Initiative. For Ukraine, the bill authorizes $400 million for 2026 and another $400 million for 2027. That's not nothing, but it's a fraction of previous support levels and a signal that the Trump administration's pressure, Putin pressure, to wind down American involvement is being felt. And here's where it gets politically charged. The bill codifies 15 15 of President Trump's bullshit executive orders. These include provisions on military procurement reform, border security, and I quote, ending left-wing ideology, wokeism, and DEI in the military, unquote. There is also $900 million for counter-narcotic operations at the border and expanded authority for the Department of Defense to support immigration enforcement. The military is increasingly being used as a tool for domestic policy priorities. Critical thinking moment. When we put nearly $1 trillion into defense spending every year without fail, but can't maintain healthcare subsidies, what does that tell you about our national priorities? Who benefits from these choices? I want you to sit with that question. Now, let's talk about what did not make it into the final bill. IVF, in vitro fertilization, coverage for military families, gone. Both the House and Senate Armed Services Committees had passed provisions to expand fertility treatment coverage for active duty service members and their families. Representative Sera and Senator Tammy Duckworth championed this. But Speaker Mike Johnson, personally, worked behind the scenes to strip it from the final bill. Military families who want to start a family through IVF are still on their own. The Megobari Act, which stands for Mobilizing and Enhancing Georgia's Options for Building Accountability, Resilience, and Independence, which would have sanctioned officials in the Republic of Georgia for undermining democracy and stability, was also cut after last-minute negotiations. The Safe Research Act, which would have prohibited federal research collaboration with certain foreign nationals, was removed from the final version. That's actually a win for academic freedom and scientific collaboration, though it was presented by its supporters as a national security measure. And of course, absolutely nothing about health care subsidies. That wasn't even on the table for the NDAA. That fight happened elsewhere. And we lost it. The 43-day shutdown. What happened? Let's talk about what just happened, because the context matters. From October 1st to November 12th, 2025, the federal government was shut down. 43 days. The longest shutdown in American history. Longer than the 35-day shutdown in 2018-2019 over border wall funding. For those that need the reminder, Trump was president then, too. This time, here's what happened. Senate Democrats refused to pass a continuing resolution unless Republicans agreed to extend the Enhanced Affordable Care Act premium tax credits. These credits have been in place since 2021, keeping health insurance affordable for millions of Americans. They were set to expire, and Democrats drew a line in the sand. For 43 days, over 700,000 federal employees were furloughed. Another 730,000 essential workers had to work without pay. The Congressional Budget Office estimates the economy took an $11 billion permanent hit. SNAP benefits were threatened. Flight delays cascaded through the system. The IRS shut down half its operations. And in the end, Democrats got nothing. Well, almost nothing. 8 moderate Democratic senators crossed the aisle and voted to reopen the government. The deal had one clause that allowed federal workers to be paid again and operations continued, at the current level. But also in this deal, they got a promise, just a promise, of a December vote in the Senate on health care subsidies. No guarantee it would pass. No commitment from the House to even bring it to a vote. Surprise, surprise! Majority Leader John Thune kept his word. There will be a vote. But Speaker Mike Johnson has made no such commitment for the House. And President Trump has been signaling opposition to extending the subsidies, floating alternative proposals like health savings accounts that would do nothing to help people who can't afford coverage in the first place. So what did Democrats accomplish? They elevated the issue. They made Republicans own their opposition to affordable health care. But 22 million Americans are still staring down a cliff. The healthcare crisis, Congress is ignoring. Or rather, Mike Johnson is refusing to acknowledge. Let's be crystal clear about what happens on January 1st if Congress doesn't act. According to the Kaiser Family Foundation, premiums for ACA marketplace coverage will more than double on average, a 114% increase. The average subsidized enrollee currently pays about $888 per year. Without enhanced credits, that jumps to $1,904. Now, that's going to be for a guy, and I think that's pretty conservative. The real devastation hits specific groups the hardest. A healthy 60-year-old couple making $85,000 a year, this is according to the Kaiser Family Foundation again, that's just above 400% of the federal poverty level, could see their annual premiums jump by over $22,600. That would make their health insurance cost about a quarter of their entire income. That's not a typo. A quarter of their entire income just for the privilege of having health coverage. And again, this is affecting women disproportionately. We have always paid more in healthcare costs. The estimate for a woman in their 50s, this is a monthly estimate, not annual, monthly premium estimate if these credits expire will be close to $3,000 a month. And it's not like the estimate considers the possibility of maternity costs in that $3,000. If someone has a pre-existing condition, they can't be denied, but they can be charged more, and they are. The Congressional Budget Office projects that if credits expire, marketplace enrollment will drop from about 23 million to under 19 million next year. Nearly 4 million people will simply become uninsured because they can't afford coverage. But here's the thing. People are already making decisions. December 15th is the enrollment deadline for coverage that starts January 1st. That's 5 days from now. People are looking at premium estimates right now and deciding whether they can afford to stay insured. They're choosing high deductible plans with $7,500 deductibles because the premiums are lower. They're gambling with their health because Congress can't get its shit together. Even if Congress passes something in late December or January, the damage will already be done. You can't unmake a decision. You can't unforgo coverage. You can't unhave that heart attack you didn't get checked out because you couldn't afford the deductible. There's a constitutional issue. From a constitutional perspective, let's go back to basics. The preamble to the Constitution states that we, the people, form this government to, among other things, promote the general welfare. Not just provide for the common defense, though that's in there too, but promote the general welfare. Congress can find $900 billion for defense every year. They can do it for 64 consecutive years without fail. They can add $8 billion more than the president even asked for. But maintaining health care subsidies that keep 22 million people insured? That's where they draw the line? This isn't about whether the ACA is the best possible health care system. It's not. I'm on record supporting Medicare for all as a long-term solution. But right now, in this moment, we're talking about whether Congress will let millions of people lose affordable coverage while simultaneously approving nearly $1 trillion for defense contractors without blinking. This is what promote the general welfare looks like to this Congress. $900 billion for weapons. Nothing for your health care. What can you do? I don't do analysis paralysis here, so let's talk about action. First, if you're enrolled in ACA coverage or know someone who is, the December 15th deadline is almost here. Go to healthcare.gov or your state marketplace and understand your options. Even with higher premiums, staying insured may be better than going without. Look at what's available before you decide. Second, contact your representatives today. Not tomorrow, today. The Senate vote Thune promised is supposed to happen this month. Here's your script, and I'll put it in the description box below too. Say, I'm calling about the expiring ACA premium tax credits. 22 million Americans will see their premiums more than double if Congress doesn't act before December 31st. We just endured a 43-day shutdown over this issue. It's time to deliver. I expect you to support extending these credits. How you vote on this will determine how I vote in 2026. Third, if you're in a swing district, you have extra leverage. Representatives like Don Bacon in Nebraska, Mike Lawler in New York, and Brian Fitzpatrick in Pennsylvania won in districts that could flip. They need to hear from constituents that letting premiums spike is political malpractice. Fourth, remember this in 2026. The NDAA will be covered in the news as a bipartisan success story. But don't let anyone forget that the same Congress that found $900 billion for defense couldn't find the political will to keep health care affordable. That's a choice. And choices have consequences at the ballot box. Here's the bottom line. The fiscal year 2026 National Defense Authorization Act is about to pass. It will be the 64th consecutive year that Congress has managed to authorize defense spending. There will be press conferences and handshakes and talk about bipartisan cooperation. But just last month, we came out of a 43-day government shutdown, the longest in American history, because Congress couldn't agree on health care. Democrats fought, they lost. And 22 million Americans are still waiting to find out if they'll be able to afford insurance next year. The NDAA shows us what Congress prioritizes: military spending, culture war provisions, border enforcement. The shutdown showed us what happens when anyone tries to prioritize healthcare: gridlock, suffering, and eventual capitulation. But we don't have to accept this. The December Senate vote is coming. The enrollment deadline is December 15th, and the 2026 midterms are coming. We can make noise. We can hold them accountable. We can make sure they know we're watching. This isn't analysis paralysis. This is a choice Congress is making, and we can make choices too. That's it for today's episode. As always, you can find detailed analysis, sources, and downloadable action guides on my Substack at ethostrek.substack.com. If this episode resonated with you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. And remember, democracy isn't a spectator sport. I'm Sera, and this is Ethos Trek. Stay tuned, stay engaged, and keep fighting for accountability. Thank you for listening to this episode. If you like this content, please poke that like button. Consider subscribing. It doesn't cost you a thing. Subscribing is totally free, and it will ensure you see new videos when they're uploaded. Ethos Trek is a relatively new channel and is not very high on the YouTube algorithm's priority list.